Hi, this is Andrew, and I'm here bringing you another Keyforge set review. This time, the last one, actually, for Call of the Archons that I plan on doing. We're going to be talking about Untamed, and couple logistical things I'm going to bring up really quick. So first of all, this is the last one I'm doing for Call of the Archons. I've done everything else. I'll still be doing deck reviews and other stuff probably, but I'm excited to get through this because I've been hoping to get around to talking about some of the spoilers from Age of Ascension before it actually comes out. And anyway, and was holding off on doing that until I'd finished Call of the Archons. So this frees me up. Okay, then you'll notice here my video is a bit funky. We're changing out some things in our house, and so stuff's kind of all over the place, and so I decided to use chroma cam to cut out everything but me. So that's cool, but it's, you know, it's funky. So oh well, and if their little logo pops up, even though I thought getting the 920 the C922X or whatever, it was supposed to be free with that, and it's definitely not. But whatever, I don't use it much because it's not very good. But today, here it is. So that's that. I went out and played at a chainbound event tonight and got my first 4 chains, which was super cool. Managed to go 4-0 at the event, and yeah, that's that. It was fun. Played against some really nice people who did really well, and the last matchup was really fun. It was a strong deck and a strong player, and but they started with 4 chains, and our actual official game was really close, but I managed to win mostly because of using I had a double control the weak and was just able to use control the weak to prevent them from coming back and getting to their 3rd key before I could get mine. We played a game just for fun afterwards, just to see, hey, if neither deck had chains, how would it do? And that game, I completely got to, it was 3 keys to 0. Maybe they got 1. Anyway, that one, they just had like a really bad shuffle. But anyway, played well, and I think the fact that it was so swingy the second game shows they did a really good job in the first game to have it be so close. So anyway, it was really fun, and yeah, got my first 4 chains, so that was cool. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. Oh, by the way, if you're interested, that was with my deck Honorable O Whispergiver, which I've done a review on. I'll link that in case you heard this and said, oh, I want to check that deck out. I'll link my review of it. So okay, let's get into the Untamed cards. We're actually still, before we get into the cards themselves, my 3 questions that I like to go over. The first is, when I open up a Keyforge deck in Call of the Archons and I see that I have Untamed, what am I hoping I'll get out of it? And the answer for me is, I think first and foremost, I'm looking for a lot of really good Amber generation, really strong Amber generation. I'm looking for the ability to have some like creature swarming effects, get a lot of creatures out and have the creatures benefit from each other. I'm hoping for some soft denial in the form of stun, exhaust, return to deck. I'm looking to be able to forge out of the normal forge step. Untamed is, as far as I can think, the only house that has 2 ways in the house to forge a key in the middle of a turn. And I'm looking for a little bit of recursion, being able to pull stuff out of my discard pile possibly, and I'm looking for maybe there's quite a few skirmish effects in Untamed, I think more than in most houses. So with that said, let's go on to the next question, which is favorite combo. My favorite combo in Untamed is Witch of the Eye plus Nocturnal Maneuver. You can, if you have a ready Witch of the Eye, you can play Nocturnal Maneuver, exhaust 3 of your opponent's cards, reap with Witch of the Eye, return Nocturnal Maneuver to your hand, exhaust another 3 of their creatures. At that point, you generated 3 amber and exhausted 3 of their creatures. And if you have a decent Untamed setup, a decent enough to justify it, then your next turn you can, reap with Witch of the Eye again and exhaust 3 more of their creatures and get 2 amber out of that, which ends up being pretty strong. If you have something stronger to do than Nocturnal Maneuver, then by all means go for it. And what do I hope to see listed next to Untamed? I like to see Brobnar, because I feel like Brobnar actually has some effects that work really nicely with Untamed. Brobnar gives you a chance of establishing board control that's going to let cards like Witch of the Eye and Hunting Witch really stay out and do a lot of good for you. Brobnar can benefit from skirmish effects like Halakor, and there's some decent fighting cards in Untamed too that would benefit from like a Relentless Assault, for example. So you can even get some really cool turns if you have a card like Ritual of the Hunt, where you can have you have a bunch of Untamed cards that are going to be decent at fighting. You have some good Brobnar cards out. You play a War Song, burn your Ritual of the Hunt, and just have a really good fighting turn. All right, on to the cards. So starting with the commons, the first one we run into is Cooperative Hunting, which when you play it deals 1 damage for each friendly creature in play. And here's what I think makes this card really strong. You may divide this damage among any number of creatures. So that means that if you have a bunch of creatures out, and let's say your opponent has 3 smaller creatures, you can split this damage between them. However, it makes the most sense to do it, and that's pretty good. Interestingly, the damage is not optional. So if you don't have enemy creatures to do it to, then you would have to do it to your own creatures. In that case, it might really make sense to spread it out so that you aren't actually destroying things. But you could definitely soak it into your opponent's first. And actually, don't quote me on this. Could you soak it all into 1 creature, even if it's more than enough to destroy that creature? I think so, because you would just divide it, not at all, right? But don't quote me on that one. But yeah, I think even if your opponent only had 1 creature and you were going to do a lot of damage, you could still just soak it into that creature. But I'd be happy to have somebody clarify that if I got it wrong. Okay. Next up, we have Full Moon. Full Moon, you play it, and then for the remainder of the turn, when you play creatures, you get amber. Simple as that. This takes a little bit of maneuvering to be really good, but even if it's just 1 amber, that's not terrible. If it's 2 amber, that's great. If it's 3 amber, that's like a Virtuous Works. So, the likelihood of this working out nicely for you is pretty good. Yeah, get some amber. Okay, next we have, now this is crazy, because the next card we have is Key Charge, which when you play it, you lose an amber, and then you forge a key at current cost. You may. So the reason I say this is crazy is because this is a common. This is a common card in Untamed. This is something you will see a lot in Untamed. And why is that crazy? Well, because this is a pretty powerful effect. Being able to forge a key not at the start of your turn has a couple benefits. One, if you're playing against shadows, it's very strong because it means that you can ramp up a bunch of amber and then forge without your opponent having an opportunity to steal. And that's a very powerful effect. Additionally, effects like Miasma, which prevent you from forging, will can't stop you from forging in this case. Yeah, all around, being able to forge in the middle is great. This also can lead to a situation where if you and your opponent are racing at the end of the game, and they're going to be 1 turn ahead of you, sometimes a Key Charge can finish off the game and end it before they have that last turn. There was a game at the event I was at tonight where it looked like the game was going to go to time. One player got to finish their turn, and the other player, they forged a key. They had enough that if they, just had another forged key step, they would have been able to do it. They couldn't, and so the game was going to, I was starting to explain how this would work in the tournament rigs, how this gets resolved, and she said, no, don't worry, I got this, and ramped up 1 amber and then played key charge and won the game. So can save you a lot of trouble in that way as well. All right, key charge is great, and it's really crazy that it's common. Okay, next we have Lost in the Woods, which gains you an amber, and then you choose 2 friendly creatures and 2 enemy creatures, and you shuffle them into their owner's deck. It depends on the situation whether this choose 2 friendly creatures, is good or not. Ideally, what you'd want is to push 2 of your creatures back into your deck that have nice play effects. So you're thinking, oh, hey, I'll get those back later, and it'll be nice. And push 2 creatures into your opponent's hand that are slow and going to need to be played and then sit around for a turn before they can do work. Sometimes you can't work it out that way, but if you can, that's a really nice way to play it. Or maybe you just get rid of something that's big and in your way, get rid of something with taunt, get rid of the shadow self so you can deal with the things that were next to it, whatever. But yeah, it can be pretty good. And sometimes you can get yourself into a situation where you have no creatures out yet. Maybe you have a handful of creatures. Your opponent has a couple creatures out, and you just play this at the start of your turn to essentially wipe the board. It can be good that way. If you're ahead, then maybe it doesn't work out for you, but it's a situationally pretty strong card. Next, we have Nocturnal Maneuver, one of my favorites. Gains you an amber, and then you exhaust up to 3 creatures. And this is a really powerful control effect. It doesn't matter if the creature has elusive or a lot of armor or was really big. You can just take care of it. It's only for a single turn, but you sort of just get it out of the picture for a little bit and can hopefully come around. And the ability to do this to 3 creatures, up to 3 creatures. There's no adjacency or same house or anything. You really have a lot of control over what it gets applied to. Okay, next up we have Regrowth. So it's a pretty crazy artwork. The bear coming out of the dead bear. It's pretty crazy looking. But we have Regrowth, and it's going to gain you an amber, and you return a creature from your discard pile to your hand. Importantly, this can only be used on creatures. It can't be used on actions or artifacts or upgrades. But in Untamed, you're probably going to be really happy to see a creature. This card shines being used on an Untamed card because you're going to be able to then dump that straight back out of your hand. Although if you had something really high value in another house, it might be useful. But similar to Arise, I think this is best in-house. Okay. Next we have Save the Pack, which destroys each damaged creature and then gains you a chain. I prefer to try to maintain board control, and so if you have board control, this often isn't a great card, and I end up discarding it a lot. But if you're playing against, if your opponent is Brobnar and they have a bunch of big creatures, but they've had an auto cannon out or something like that, or their stuff is just damaged, this can be a board wipe, and for 1 chain it can be a pretty good deal. Sometimes you can also do a little maneuvering of where damage goes to try to play this to your advantage, versus like a Gateway to Dis that's just going to blow up everything. But generally speaking, in my experience, this is often a card that I'd rather discard than play. Next up we have Vigor, which gains you an amber and then heals up to 3 damage from a creature. And if you healed 3 damage, you gain an amber. So a couple important notes here. First of all, it says heal up to 3 damage. So that means you could choose to heal 0 damage. If your opponent has a creature with a damage on it, you have no obligation to when you play this card to heal their creature. But if you can heal a creature for 3 damage, you gain an amber. And so sometimes I find it'll be worth it to actually heal my opponent's creature, even if I can heal it for 3 and actually get that 3 damage. Depends on the situation, but amber is good, so sometimes that's the better way to go. And if you can heal your own creature for 3 damage and gain 2 amber in the process, that's a really good deal. Next up, we have Ancient Bear. Ancient Bear is fun. There's a card that sort of like Fagin and Urchin goes with this, where this, I guess, is like the Urchin, although this is nothing like Urchin. That's a silly comparison, but there is a card that pairs really well with this that we'll see later, so I'll kind of set this aside once we talk about it initially. The fun thing about Ancient Bear is, so it's just 5 power, which is pretty good, but it has Assault 2, and I think it's the only creature in the game in this set that has a built-in Assault effect. But what Assault 2 means is that before the attack, 2 damage is dealt to the attacked enemy. So this means that if you use Ancient Bear to fight, let's say, Dew Fairy or Naughty the Thief, that's 2 power and elusive, well, that 2 damage is going to hit the creature and kill it, even though it had elusive, because this is before the fight. So the 2 damage is going to hit and kill that creature right away. Now, in that case, Ancient Bear still exhausts, but you got to kill that creature in a pretty efficient way compared to if you had to attack it twice because of the elusive. Additionally, Ancient Bear doesn't end up taking damage, and in fact, if you use Ancient Bear to attack any 1 or 2 power creature, even that doesn't have elusive, that damage gets applied to the creature dies, and Ancient Bear still exhausts, but the fight damage doesn't actually get dealt because the creature's already destroyed. So the Ancient Bear can do a bit of work without taking damage if you're hitting things that are in that 2 range. In some cases, this is just equivalent to doing 7 damage, which is still pretty good. Next up, we have Dew Fairy, which has only 2 power and elusive, but when it reaps, gains an amber. Well, don't creatures always gain an amber when they reap? Yes. Dew Fairy gains an extra one. So if you reap with Dew Fairy, you get 2 amber. That's very strong. If anytime there's a Dew Fairy on the board, on my opponent's side of the board, I feel like I need to deal with it because it's just so much amber generation so quickly. So yeah, if you can drop Dew Fairies on the board, your opponent either has to deal with them, or if they don't, then you get to use that effect, and it's quite strong. Next up, Dust Pixie, which I don't care too much whether it stays on the board, but when you play it out of your hand, you gain 2 amber, right? It's 1 power, gains you 2 amber. That's great, fantastic. Then we have Snufflegator, 4 power, and Skirmish. And it's a beast. And actually, I think the Ancient Bear is a beast. I neglected to point that out. Beast, it'll end up mattering later. There are, Niffle Queen, which will come up later. Niffle Queen causes creatures with the beast trait to have an extra power, so that could matter. And if you can imagine having a 5 power with Skirmish, you can kill most things with that. So that is quite strong. 4 power with Skirmish is fantastic on its own, but 5 power with Skirmish is really going to be, you can knock out most things. I'm almost always going to be using this to fight because of the Skirmish effect. Although if my opponent has nothing on the board, then maybe I'll reap. Okay, next up we have Murmook, which is 3 power and makes your opponent's keys cost an extra amber. This can be a really strong effect. It's also a beast. You'll notice. Most of the time I feel like Murmook isn't like a super powerful card, but just it's always a high priority to deal with because of that extra amber cost. Now, if I know, okay, I'm not going to be forging for a couple turns, I'm building a board state, maybe I don't worry about my opponent's Marmook. It's just not bothering me at that point, and I'm working up to where I'm going to destroy it before I forge. But if I'm thinking about forging a key, then I'm definitely going to be wanting to prioritize killing that Marmook. Then we have Niffleape, which is Beast and Niffle. You'll see again that matters when we come to the Niffle Queen. This also has the same relation to Niffle Queen that Urchin does to Fagin and that Assault Bear does to, or the Ancient Bear does to the Ancient Bear Flute, in that if you get Niffle Queen, then you will also get Niffleapes. But Niffleape is a Beast and Niffle, which means if you have a Niffle Queen on the board, it gets +2 power. And when it attacks, you ignore Taunt and Elusive. That's kind of a weird effect, and I always forget about it. I usually just think about this as it's a 3-power creature. But because you ignore Taunt and Elusive, there are certain cases where the Niffleape can do quite a lot of work. And if you know your opponent has one of these, then you might be concerned. It's also interesting if you're relying on Taunt or Elusive. It's also interesting to me. I feel like I think this is the creature that's on the Control the Weak artwork, but also, Niffleape looks a little dis-y, so that's kind of, I don't know, it's just weird that there seems to be a creature here that maybe has a slight affinity for dis, even though it's an untamed thing. Next up we have the Hunting Witch, who is only 2 power, but each time you play another creature you gain an amber. And this can be so crazy. First of all, I love the artwork. It's your classic, like, the pet looks like the owner. I don't know, it's just a very cool card. Yeah, if you can keep a Hunting Witch on the board, then even as you're playing other houses, you're gaining that amber every time you play creatures, and so that's just fantastic. If I can, I'd like to put this next to something that'll protect it, something with Taunt, maybe a Shadow Self, maybe a Bulwark, and of course, if my opponent has one, I'm very much prioritizing killing it. And lastly, in the commons, we have Witch of the Eye, and it is a very valid question. Which would you prioritize killing, the Hunting Witch or the Witch of the Eye? And the reason, even though the gaining amber every time you play a creature is such a dramatic effect, but Witch of the Eye has this really crazy potential, and it depends so much on what action cards you have, what other Untamed cards you have, because being able to just return a card from your discard pile to your hand, especially if it's an Untamed card that you can immediately play and get an effect from, if that's a strong effect, this is huge. This is such a great benefit. Yeah, I mean, it's just so good. And you might think, oh well, if there's a Hunting Witch and a Witch of the Eye on the board, and you kill the Hunting Witch, well, they could on their next turn choose Untamed, reap with Witch of the Eye, and now they have their Hunting Witch back. So I think if you're prioritizing one of these to kill, you have to kill the Witch of the Eye. It's just so flexible and so strong in what it can do. And once in a while it might be worth grabbing something in another house, but again, as usual, anytime you're pulling something into your hand, I'd rather it be something that we can dump out right away. So you really have to justify it if there's one that we want to keep around. All right, now we are on to the uncommons, and we will start with Fogbank, which gains you an amber and then says that your opponents cannot use creatures to fight on their next turn. Cool artwork here as well, suggestive of a phantom army that's just keeping your enemy busy for a while. This is the same effect as Fogify in Logos, but yeah, just good effect. It's good. And if you just dropped a Hunting Witch, this is a great way to say, hey, this has to stay on the board for a turn unless you have direct damage or a direct destruction effect. Alright. Next up we have Grasping Vines, which gains you an amber and then returns up to 3 artifacts to their owner's hand. That's great. There are some artifacts that are really nice to slow down. When I play this, I'm going to prioritize artifacts that are slow in the sense that they have an action ability they want to exhaust to be used. So that means that my opponent's going to have to play it exhausted and wait to use it. If you throw a speed sigil back in your opponent's hand, first of all, they'll get the effect immediately when they play it, the next time they play it, and they'll actually get another amber. So you've kind of helped them in a way. So yeah, with this, I would rather prioritize. Excuse me, sorry. I'd rather prioritize cards that have some sort of action, exhaust effect or even an omni effect. If I have a card that gains me an amber, an artifact that gains me an amber when I play it, I might consider shoving that back into my hand just for fun, although probably most likely if it's an untamed artifact. Okay, so we have Life Web, which gains you an amber, and then if your opponent played 3 or more creatures on their previous turn, steal 2 amber. If you know your opponent has this in their deck, think about that, pay attention to that. If you have 3 creatures but one of them is not, is not that critical, you might choose to not play it. It just depends. But yeah, if you can pull this off, that's a 5 amber swing if that works out, which is pretty crazy. Then we have Mimicry, another just really cool card in Untamed because this is so flexible. When you play it, you treat it as a copy of an action card in your opponent's discard pile. They have a bait and switch. You can bait and switch. They have a Neurosiphon. You can gain an amber, steal 1, and draw a card. Anything that exists, this could be. So it's pretty powerful, and not. I would say it depends on what's in your opponent's discard pile and them having actually played stuff and discarded it. But this is stronger than just having one of those cards because you get to choose when you play it what it gets to be. So very strong, very flexible. Then we have Nature's Call, which gains you an amber and then returns up to 3 creatures to their owner's hand. This is also really really flexible in that you're allowed you can do this to your opponent's creatures, but you could also do it to your own creature. If you have 3 Dust Pixies on the board, you could return those to your hand and get 6 more amber that way. If your opponent has 3 Pit Demons on the board, you could return those to their hand and keep them from stealing 3 from you next turn. So it just depends on the situation, but this is flexible enough to be good in either situation. And of course it has a poop joke. Then we have Troop Call, which gains you an amber and then returns each friendly Niffle creature from your discard pile and from play to your hand. So that means that if they had damage, that damage is going to get taken off. If they were dead, that's fixed. And I think, if I'm remembering right, I think actually, let's see, card traits, Niffle. I don't think there are very many. I mean, yeah, it really is only Niffle Ape and Niffle Queen. So I think this must be another one of the ones that requires there to be Niffle Apes in your deck, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, can be strong. Of course, because these don't have play effects, that dampens it a little bit. But if you happen to have like a full moon or a hunting witch out, then that's fantastic to be able to do that. Then we have Nepenthe Seed, which is an artifact that this is actually pretty interesting. That's an uncommon. Again, powerful in that it pulls something from your discard pile to your hand. That can be anything. and maybe even a little extra powerful because it's Omni. So you really don't have to choose what you're trying to pull out until it's actually time. And you can use it on a non-untamed thing if you want. You can play it on your untamed turn, and then on your Logos turn use it. And this is part of one of the quote-unquote OTK combos that are out there, where the whole goal is to be able to play a library access, sacrifice dependency to pull library access back into your hand, play library access again, and then play a couple of Logos cards, and by that time you're drawing 2 cards for every card you play, and you're probably going to be able to cycle through your whole deck and generate a lot of amber, and if you have a way to forge a key out of turn, then potentially do that. So can definitely be a very strong card. Even outside of that situation, if you have any good action cards or creatures, this is fantastic. Okay, next we have Ritual of Balance, which is an artifact that does not gain you an amber when you play it, but exhausts to steal 1 if your opponent has 6 or more amber. It's funny that they call it balance, because Ritual of Balance, because it has nothing to do with how much you have. If you have 13 and your opponent has 7, you can use this to steal 1. But and yeah, balance is definitely a means to an end. The end being me winning and forging before my opponent. So I feel like usually when I see this come out, it doesn't do that much work. You might get a couple steals out of it, which is actually pretty good, but that means you have to play Untamed on the right turn. Where this can be quite oppressive is if you have a strong, Untamed board and you have this out, and your opponent is struggling to get up enough amber. They're just barely getting to 6, and you're able to use this to knock them back down to 5. That can be pretty crazy and frustrating for them, which is good for you. Next up, we have Big Twig, which I'm very partial to. I'm a big Tolkien fan, and I love the Ents, so I like seeing an NT kind of guy here. And Big Twig is 7 power, which is a lot, and is a beast, and also has the beast trait. And Big Twig can only fight stunned creatures. And I remember when I first read that, I thought, oh, that's a limitation, but at least he has a way to stun a creature. My problem is, once I started reaping to stun and exhaust a creature, I was like, oh, that's so good. The next time, do I want to fight that creature that I already stunned, or do I want to stun and exhaust something else? And the answer is, I probably want to stun and exhaust something else. I can definitely imagine exceptions to this, but usually that reap, gain an amber, stun, and exhaust a creature is just a really powerful effect. So I'm happy to have it come out. Now, interestingly, that's not a May, so that means if you only have Big Twig on the board and he reaps, he has to stun him. Well, he's already exhausting himself, but he would have to stun himself. Next up, we have CotA Hazri. So this is that second out of step amber forging or key forging ability here with CotA Hazri. He is a 3 power, but when you play him, you lose an amber. That's unconditional. You're going to lose an amber when you play him, unless you have no amber. If you do lose an amber, you may forge a key at current cost. So, in a typical situation, that means that before you play CotA Hazri, you need to have 7 amber, and then you play him, you lose 1, you drop down to 6, and then you can forge a key. So he works the same as Key Charge. He's an uncommon instead of a common, but really the same effect. As far as I understand it, and let's double check here if I have Hunting Witch in play. Pretty sure this is true. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because the play, yeah, that's right. So play abilities happen after the creature enters play. So, and the Hunting Witch triggers when the creature enters play. So that means that if you have 6 amber and a Hunting Witch on the board and you play CotA Hazri, the Hunting Witch gives you an amber, and then you do CotA Hazri's play effect. So you go from 6 to 7, then from 7 to 6, and then Forge. So quite a strong effect, and works really well with cards like Full Moon or Hunting Witch. If you have Hunting Witch and Full Moon, then CotA Hazri is probably better to have than Key Charge. Not to mention the fact that then you just have a 3-power creature that you can do something with later. You can even, if you have Mars, you can Zymoth Ink Drone him and put him in your archives for later. That's pretty fantastic. Okay, next up is Flaxia, who is a fairy and has 4 power, and when you play Flaxia, you gain 2 amber if you control more creatures than your opponent. That's sort of more like a Brahmanar themed thing, and funny in a fairy, but yeah, she wants you to have more creatures than your opponent, and if that's true when you play her, then you gain 2 amber, which is pretty good, and then you have a 4-power creature on the board. Halakor is fantastic. Halakor says that first off, Halakor is 4 power and a beast. And Halakor says that each friendly flank creature gains Skirmish. So that means if you play Halakor on the flank, then Halakor has Skirmish, which is good. That's like Snufflegator, right? And exactly as good as Snufflegator, because Snufflegator is also power 4 and a beast. But it also means that your creature on the other flank is also has Skirmish. So, very simple, easy situation to imagine is you have a Dodger or Headhunter down on one end and a Halakor on the other end. They both have Skirmish, and that's pretty good. Even better is you get like a Dodger on either flank, and Halakor is just in the middle. And when you take an Untamed turn, you reap with Halakor. But when you take a Shadows turn, you fight with 2 5-power Skirmish things that steal. And that can be pretty good. So I love Halakor. It just sets up really nice board control schemes. Okay, next up we have Mushroom Man, and Mushroom Man is only 2 power, except if you play Mushroom Man early, it's much better than 2 power, because Mushroom Man gets plus 3 power for each unforged key you have. So that means that if you play Mushroom Man on turn 1, Mushroom Man is power 11. However, by the time you get to the end of the game, he's going to be power 5, right? Because you have 2 keys forged, so that means that he's only going to get plus 3 and be 5. It's fun. It's kind of funny to be in a situation where you have Mushroom Man, he has a bunch of damage on him, you forge, and he dies right away, because suddenly his power drops. Anyway, yeah, good to have early, although I think people sometimes get a little too excited about him, because an 11 power creature is great, but again, fighting isn't totally the name of the game. So you also need some ways to be generating amber, which you probably have if you're Untamed, but just be aware, like, having an 11 power creature is not the game. Alright, then we have Niffle Queen, who is Beast and Niffle, and 6 power, and each other friendly Beast creature gets an extra power, and each other friendly Niffle creature gets a power. It's possible to have 2 of these on the board, and if you do, then your Niffle Queens are both 8 power, and your Niffle Apes are 7 power, and your Snufflegators are 6 power. Pretty ridiculous. And my understanding is that these do have a special relationship with Niffle Ape, where if you get a Niffle Queen, you will get Niffle Apes. Then we have Way of the Bear, which is an upgrade that gains you a single amber and gives the creature it's attached to Assault 2, same as the Ancient Bear we talked about earlier. And then we have Way of the Wolf, which gains you an amber when you play it and gives the creature you attach it to Skirmish. That's pretty cool to have a flexible thing like that. Alright, on to the rares. Starting off, we have Curiosity, which gains you an amber and destroys each scientist creature. This is it's Logos and Mars that are going to have scientist creatures. So this is Logos and Mars hate, and obviously the artwork is Logos focused, and ironically, you know, we usually say Curiosity killed the cat. Here, the cat killed the scientist. Eee. Dark. Fertility Chant. Gain 4 amber and give your opponent 2. That's pretty good, actually. And situationally extra good, because if you're just trying to gain 4 because you're going to use key charge to forge your 3rd key, you don't care how much you gave your opponent. Then we have Perilous Wild, which gains an amber and then destroys each elusive creature. Great way to deal with elusives. Scout, which gains an amber, and for the remainder of the turn, up to 2 friendly creatures gain skirmish. Then fight with those creatures one at a time. Notice it doesn't say ready and fight, so this will not ready creatures. But it will give them skirmish, and they can be of a different house, right? They don't have to be untamed. So maybe you have some Broadnar creatures on the board, and this will give them skirmish and let you fight with them, which is pretty strong if they're big creatures. Next up, we have Stampede, which gains an amber, and then if you used 3 or more creatures this turn, steal 2 amber. That's pretty cool. I actually haven't seen this one in play, but it seems like a really fun card, and you know, really capitalizes on having board control. So fun stuff. The Common Cold gains an amber and then deals 1 damage to each creature, and then you may destroy all Mars creatures. I love, you know, this is a reference to War of the Worlds, but then also you have kind of a just fun, I don't know, collectible card game reference here. It's a weaker version of the Uncommon Cold. Yeah, so you deal 1 damage to each creature, and then you may destroy all Mars creatures. So nice Mars hate there. Word of Returning, gain an amber, deal a damage to each enemy creature for each amber on it, and then return all amber from those creatures to your pool. Great if you're playing against Sanctum or something else that has a strong capture game. This will kill an old Bruno straight out if it captured 3. Yeah, and then you get the amber back, which is great. Yeah, that seems like a powerful effect. It just shuts down 1 form of amber control pretty hard. Okay, Bear Flute. So this is the one that, you know, if you have a Bear Flute, then you will have an Ancient Bear. Amber Flute, when you exhaust it, it will fully heal an Ancient Bear. Okay. But if there are no Ancient Bears in play, then you search your deck and discard pile and put each Ancient Bear from them into your hand. If you do, shuffle your discard pile into your deck. So it's possible to be in a situation where, like, it's possible for somebody to have like 1 of these and 2, 3, 4 Ancient Bears. If that's the case, you're put in a weird situation. Well, first of all, I don't think it's crazy strong, because they have to call Untamed. So hopefully you need better things. You need other good things going for you in Untamed in order for this to make sense. So if your opponent's doing this, they have to pick Untamed. But this can also lead to a situation where what you're better off doing, if your opponent has 4 Ancient Bears and this card out, is killing 3 of them, but not the 4th, because that way their Bear Flute doesn't pull the other ones out. So just that's something to sort of be aware of and play around if your opponent has 1 of these. Ritual of the Hunt is an artifact that gains you an amber when you play it, and then you can Omni-sacrifice it to be able to use friendly untamed creatures that turn. use is important, because if it's a Snufflegator, you might want to fight, but with Dew Fairy, you might want to reap. So just be aware you can do either. Or use an action ability if one of them has those, which most don't. Then we have our next rare is World Tree, which is an artifact that can exhaust to return a creature from your discard pile to the top of your deck. So nice, another recursion ability. Then we have Witch of the Wilds, who is 4 power, a beast and a witch, and during each turn in which Untamed is not your active house, you may play 1 Untamed card. That's pretty strong. If you can keep this out, then this just gives you a great, I mean, it's like having a phase shift every turn for Untamed. Interesting rules clarification: if you, let's say, phase shift Witch of the Wilds or Wild Wormhole Witch of the Wilds, Witch of the Wilds lets you play another Untamed card in addition to the one you just played with Wild Wormhole or Untamed, or phase shift. So anyway, just be aware, if you have 2 Witch of the Wilds out, then you can play 2 Untamed cards on your turn, which is fantastic. Briar Grubbling is another rare, 2 power and hazardous 5. So that means that before something attacks it, you deal 5 damage to the attacking enemy. For that reason, I'm usually okay just letting it stay on the board if my opponent has one. That doesn't help it if it attacks. So it's probably just going to sit there and reap. If I had one of these, I'd probably want to attach some sort of reap effect to it, if I could, so that it would make my opponent want to try to deal with it and attack it. If I really was worried about one of these, the way I'd be most likely to take it out would be with some sort of direct damage. Next up, we have Fuzzy Gruen, which gains you 2 amber when you play it, but gives your opponent 1 also, and is a 5 power beast. So pretty decent. Then we have Giant Sloth. So Giant Sloth is interesting. 6 power, and you can't use it unless you have discarded an Untamed card from your hand this turn. Maybe Save the Pack or something. And then you exhaust the Giant Sloth to gain 3 amber. I mean, you don't have to do that. You could fight or reap, but probably that's what you want to do, is gain 3 amber with it. But yeah, you do have to discard a card, discard an Untamed card in order to do that. Yeah, an important clarification: cannot takes priority over may. Okay, then we have Inca the Spider, and Inca is a very studious spider. Inca is only 1 power, but has poison. Oh yeah, I think I said when we were talking about Shadows that Shadows was the only house with any poison in it. That's not true. Inca has poison, but not Skirmish. So Inca probably is very likely to die in whatever fight it gets into. But when Inca is played, Inca stuns a creature, and when Inca reaps, Inca stuns a creature. That can be pretty strong if you can manage to keep it out. Then we have Kendrith Longshot, who is a human ranger, 3 power, elusive, and skirmish. And when she reaps, she deals 2 damage to a creature. That's pretty okay. I mean, being able to just reap and do 2 damage is fine, and she has elusive. And if you need to kill something that's 3, you can do skirmish, although, yeah, if something's 2, you almost certainly would rather do the reap effect. So the skirmish is seems a little odd on here. Then we have Lupo the Scarred, who is a 6 power beast with skirmish. And when you play Lupo out of your hand, you deal 2 damage to an enemy creature. Yeah, this is just better than Snufflegator. Then we have Mighty Tiger, who's a 4 power creature. When you play Mighty Tiger, you deal 4 damage to an enemy creature. Really cool art, by the way, and nice playmat. Then we have Piranha Monkeys, which is a 2 power beast. And when you play the Piranha Monkeys, or when you reap with the Piranha Monkeys, you do 2 damage to each other creature, which is pretty That's pretty crazy. And notice also, these, man, they're in Untamed, but they look so dissy. Uh, yeah. Good way to get a lot of damage in. It's just a little rough because you're doing it to your own other creatures as well. And then lastly, we have Taliga, which is sort of the opposite of Hunting Witch. Taliga is 3 power, and each time your opponent plays a creature, you gain an amber. So yeah, again, sort of the opposite of Hunting Witch, and really cool. I don't have a deck with Taliga. I would love to, because she sort of just makes your opponent sad as they're doing things that they really should be trying to do, but you're making them sad to do those things. And yeah, seems like a strong card. So that's that. That is at this point, I've done every single card in Call of the Archons. We've talked about it. If you've watched through all of them, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope to get around to doing some spoilers soon for Age of Ascension. And when that comes out, I will probably be doing videos like this for that set as well. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you want to see more, please do subscribe. And if you liked the video, then there is a button for that. Thanks very much, and keep forging keys.